I'm Charlie Sykes. No tightrope walking here, but we are trying to keep things balanced. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, Governor Scott Walker signs the bill authorizing taxpayer support for a new Bucks arena. The Packers win their preseason opener on the road against New England. Brewer general manager Doug Melvin steps down and will become an advisor to the team. Bo Ryan says he might actually stick around as Badger men's basketball coach. They call this going full Favre. The State Fair enjoys a run of great weather and a record-setting tightrope walk by Nick Wallenda. The PGA Championship is underway at Whistling Straits. But we start with more turmoil in politics. Hillary Clinton's troubles mount as she turns over her private email server to the FBI. Polls show her trailing Bernie Sanders in New Hampshire, and all that has led to buzz about the possibility that Vice President Joe Biden might jump into the race. On the Republican side, the Donald continues to lead, but new polls show some movement. Ben Carson and Carly Fiorina are on the rise, but those new polls also show Scott Walker appearing to slip, losing his leads in Iowa and New Hampshire. In Iowa, Walker has slipped to third place, a summer blip or signs of real trouble. We'll ask our pundit panel. Joining me on our panel this morning, defense attorney Dan Adams, the managing editor of RightWisconsin.com, Colin Roth, political strategist Linda Bruin, and media trackers Brian Sikma. So give me your take on these numbers. Scott Walker dropping from first to third in Iowa. Is this just August jitters, or does his campaign have a challenge ahead?
Well, the Republican Party base in Iowa and really across the country is flirting with different candidates. In a field that's this crowded, nobody's going to stand out on top for very long. They're going to rise and fall. And for somebody like Governor Scott Walker, this is to be expected. That nobody should be jumping up and down and waving their arms up in the air about this. What we do know is that the Walker team knows how to assemble powerful grassroots organisms. They did that in 2012 in the recall elections. 2014, they repeated that. That's what the Walker campaign is focused on doing in Iowa. That's what they need to continue to focus on doing, is just reach out to those grassroots and build that support.
Your take, Linda Bruin.
Well, I think it's a serious situation, and Walker's folks are going to have just announced they're going to spend $7 million on ads in there in the next 4 months. They're bringing in a former Nevada governor to come in and lead the thing. So I think he's taking it seriously. I think from their perspective, it's not good that he fell to third.
Why did he fall to third? What is your sense?
Well,
what's going on?
I think Carson, in a way, is also a fringe candidate, not anywhere near the same weird league as Donald Trump. But so I think that the Iowan Republicans are looking at these really kind of shot-in-the-dark candidates.
What do you think is happening to Walker's numbers? I mean, he had a pretty substantial lead in Iowa. He's all in on Iowa. Winning if Carly Fiorina finishes third in Iowa, that's going to be a huge victory. He finishes third in Iowa, he's in trouble.
Well, I think it's very, very hard to sit on a lead at this point, and he hasn't done anything to make that lead bigger. He hasn't done anything necessarily to add to his numbers. Whereas you've seen some of the performances of primetime debates in which you see Ben Carson, you see the emergence of Carly Fiorina. The electorate right now is very, very fickle, and these candidates are going to rise and fall. But Walker is going to have to do things to get back into this race.
Is he in danger of being overshadowed? I mean, there's a lot of candidates in this race, and being overshadowed, and his personality, it's going to be hard to compete with some of these flashier candidates. Dan Adams.
And I don't think that he should be concerned about being overshadowed. I mean, his greatest strength is this incredible discipline, almost robotic discipline. The flip side of that is he's boring. So as people, as Brian said, are flirting with their kind of flavor of the month, he's going to be slow and steady to the
this has been my argument. This has been exactly my argument that he's okay because he's got the staying power, that he can be the slow and steady, and he will be the last man standing. And he and Marco Rubio have the highest approval ratings of any of the Republican candidates. A lot of these other guys have huge negatives. They don't. However, on the other hand, because he is so invested in Iowa, the question is, what happens to him? Will he be the last man standing? Can he be the last man standing if he doesn't do well in Iowa?
He also needs some people to drop. To take the arrows.
And he can be the last man standing. Remember, in the last 6 Republican Iowa caucuses for president, only 2 of them have gone on to actually win the presidential nomination. So you don't have to win Iowa to win the nomination. I'm more concerned about what it does to Walker's personal campaign, about the momentum that he should have.
Well, and I think part of it is this problem that he does need to move off of the talking points. He does need to start saying something new. He needs to find a way to differentiate himself from some of the other candidates, because right now, I mean, his problem maybe, I mean, you know, Donald Trump may have sucked all the oxygen out of the room, but if you look what's happening in Iowa, he also now is competing for attention with Carly Fiorina and Ben Carson. You may think of them as fringe candidates, but they're doing very, very well in the grassroots. So what is your glass half full this week? What is your glass half empty? We'll go around the table. Dan Adams.
Well, my glass has been very full because on August 1st, my wonderful wife gave birth to our first child, a baby girl. Mom and baby are healthy, and we're just over the moon with happiness. My glass is half empty because, well, sleep has been sparse at the Adams household these past 2 exciting weeks.
Colin Roth.
My glass is half full because the field of Republican candidates is one of the best in my relatively short lifetime. It's half empty because we just had another consecutive week consumed by Donald Trump.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my glass is half empty because Donald Trump is still leading in Republican presidential polls. But it's half full because the candidates who led their party's opinion polls in August of 2003, 2007, and 2011 all failed to get their party's nomination.
Brian Sigma.
Well, my glass is half full because State Senator Alberta Darling is being recognized by Right Wisconsin for her hard work promoting conservative reforms right here in our state. My glass is half empty because Darling just announced her opposition to some common sense legislation that would ban the use of aborted fetal body parts in research experiments.
Well, my glass is half full because gas prices have been dropping for months now, but it's half empty because you know this. A glitch at one refinery has caused the price at the pump to explode. You think maybe the fact that we haven't built a major refinery in this country since 1977 might have something to do with that? Still ahead on Sunday Insight, a suspect in a deadly shooting was released at the request of the Milwaukee County District Attorney. What city leaders have to say about the move as the violence in Milwaukee continues. Milwaukee's summer of violence continues as the number of murders nears 100. But last week we heard this troubling story. A suspect in a shooting that killed 2 men and injured 3 others was released from custody on just a signature bond, a move made at the request of the Milwaukee District Attorney John Chisholm's office. At the request of prosecutors, the move was questioned by some city officials. Mario Granville was charged with 2 counts of first-degree reckless homicide, 3 counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety, all as a party to the crime. Another suspect remains behind bars on $200,000 bail. The story was highlighted by Milwaukee Alderman and mayoral candidate Bob Donovan, who said he's been arrested and charged with shooting 5 individuals, killing 2, and he was just recently released on his own signature bond, as if his signature means anything. He's now currently roaming the streets of Milwaukee. Police Chief Ed Flynn called the move disheartening, but Chisholm defended the release, suggesting the prosecutors may have a weak case against Granville. You're a defense attorney. What do you make of a story like this?
Well, Bob Donovan's wrong on one point.
Yeah.
He's on GPS monitoring, which is basically house arrest. Now,
I feel so much safer now.
He had a speedy trial demand in the state of Wisconsin. If you're charged with a felony, you have a right to a trial within 90 days.
Right.
The state decided that they didn't have a strong case, so rather than dismiss the case outright, they're trying to build a better case. And while that happens, he's got to be let on a signature bond. It's the law in Wisconsin.
A signature bond, but seriously, you have the other guys, behind bars with $200,000 bail. I guess the reason that this, I think, touched a nerve. We have had so much gun crime in the city of Milwaukee. In each and every case, it turns out that these guys have gone through this revolving door criminal justice system. Does this raise questions in your mind about the way the DA is handling cases like this?
Yes, it absolutely does. And kudos to Alderman Donovan for bringing this up. Kudos to the newspaper for reporting on it. And kudos to Chief Flynn for saying it was disheartening. But it certainly does raise questions in your mind how seriously we're taking gun crimes.
And this is actually, I think it was the first time that we saw a front page story that actually talked about the policies that John Chisholm has in the city of Milwaukee, because part of the question that we have here is the cops keep arresting these guys, some of the most dangerous criminals in this city, but if they are let out by the DAs, if they are let out by judges, if they are put back out on the street, then how frustrating it must be.
I totally agree with you, except in this specific case, there's some things in here that actually lead some credence to what you were talking about. First of all, Judge Conkle is one of the strictest judges, hands some of the stiffest sentence. He's the one that allowed him on the signature bond. I guess the part that just frustrates me is it points out a problem with this speedy trial, speedy trial laws. This is the second time Granville has gamed the system and been arrested for something, demanded a speedy trial, and then was forced out on a bond. And the last time he never ended up being prosecuted because the witness recanted.
The witnesses disappear. And of course, if we have a no snitching culture in Milwaukee and people are nervous about testifying against some of these thugs, once they get released this way, well, that obviously doesn't make them feel safer about testifying. Brian Sykes.
Charlie, what this gets back to is law enforcement needs to be more aggressive about securing the witness testimony that they need to build these cases. If they know that an individual could be released on a bond because of the request for a speedy trial, they need to work very quickly to prioritize that case to make sure they can get the evidence that they need to build a better case and come back. The reason I think this does strike a chord, as other people have already mentioned, is the fact that this is now we're getting close to 100 killings in the city of Milwaukee. 100 people that are no longer living in the city of Milwaukee because of gun violence and because of a criminal justice system that repeatedly puts these people back on the street. Hopefully this is a sign that the media is waking up to the problem and is going to cover it
more. I don't know about the media there. I mean, they did run the story, but had Bob Donovan not brought this up at a press conference, would we know about it? This happened last month. So it raises in my mind the question, what else is going on? What other kinds of folks are going through the system and being kicked out by John Chisholm? I mean, we know that the DA's office got national publicity, not so much attention locally, for the Milwaukee experiment, which actually encourages the prosecutors to let guys back out on the street. So you may not want to hear it, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice this week. Dan Adams, you're first.
To Wisconsin GOP lawmakers who are now working on reforming the John Doe law. I'm glad you found an interest in individual rights. Use this time to explore other ideas that protect regular people against the heavy hand of the government.
Colin Roth.
My advice is for Democrats. Now might be a good time to come up with a backup plan for that inevitable presidency of Hillary Clinton.
Linda Bruin.
Well, gas prices have been down and up, but if you're planning a major road trip, you might want to wait until after September 15th. Experts predict that by the time we're in football season, tens of thousands of gas stations will have prices below $2 a gallon.
Brian Sykes.
Well, my unsolicited advice is for Professor Michael Bell of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you really think capitalism is terrible and Karl Marx got it right, voluntarily donate part of your six-figure salary to help students reduce their student loan debt.
This is me not holding my breath for that. My unsolicited advice is to Russ Feingold. Back in 1992, Russ, you felt so strongly about your promise to raise most of your campaign cash from Wisconsinites that you wrote it on your garage door. Last week, you said, never mind, you're going to break that promise. My advice, ixnay on the garage door promises if you don't want to look like a world-class hypocrite. Coming up on Sunday Insight, state lawmakers looking to outlaw selling, donating, and experimenting with fetal body parts in Wisconsin, but there are concerns it could also put a halt to potentially life-saving research. A sharp divide over the traffic and use of fetal body parts and tissues. In the wake of videos showing Planned Parenthood officials discussing the sale of body parts from aborted babies, there have been moves to defund Planned Parenthood and to limit the use of the tissues. Last week, there was a hearing on a bill here in Wisconsin that would sharply restrict the transfer of such tissue. Authors of the bill said it would restrict the ghoulish marketing of human body parts, while critics said that it might effectively bring an end to biomedical research in the state. Colin Roth, break this down. How is this playing out?
Well, I very much doubt it will bring an end to biomedical research, but what's going on here is what they're trying to do is kind of end this quid pro quo, kind of black market use of fetal tissue that comes from abortion providers who kind of go through a third-party group, a middleman, if you will, that ends up using this for research. I think there's a better way to do it, and as someone who's pro-life, I think it's a good bill.
Okay, Linda Bruin.
Well, I think there's two major parts of this bill. The one is stopping the for-profit sale of fetal tissue after abortions. I totally
Which
support
is already
that.
illegal in federal law.
And I agree with Senator Alberta Darling. She doesn't support that part of the bill either. Neither does Scott Walker, and that's what he wants to focus on. But the part of the bill that bans the research is where I disagree with the bill's proponents, and I think that's the part that's going to trip people up in the Senate and could cause that piece of it to be removed.
There are two dueling narratives here. I mean, are we focusing on the trafficking in tissues, or are we trying to ban academic research? Because I could certainly see the left try to turn this into an attack on science as opposed to putting the focus on this ghoulish dismemberment of unborn babies and selling them.
Well, you're exactly right, Charlie. People are trying to pivot and say this is about banning research, and that has nothing to do with what this bill is all about. In fact, if you look at the Medical College of Wisconsin, which is right here in the Milwaukee area, is not lobbying against this bill for a very good reason, because they know this is not about banning medical research. There are other organizations, nonprofit foundations that are funding cutting-edge research right here in Wisconsin that are not opposing it. The University of Wisconsin, unfortunately, has a long history of using aborted fetal tissue as part of their academic research, as part of their scientific research. They don't have to use that. This bill simply says you can continue to pursue research, but you must do it in an ethical fashion.
Okay, Dan.
Well, I think there's a middle ground here between marketing, that undercover video was kind of shocking to everyone, versus the use of fetal tissue. I mean, the alternative of not using fetal tissues, the tissue is thrown away, and it doesn't advance humanity's goals at all. Ben Carson, who's uber conservative, in 1992 did fetal tissue research or research that
he has disputed that report. He has disputed
it's in an academic paper.
Yeah, well, his name is on an academic paper that is signed by a number of individuals. It does not mean that he actually did any of that.
But he signed it.
There has been,
there are ethical standards. There are ethical standards against using, prisoner body parts, using the people who are executed their body parts, because we understand that there are some sort of standards. I think the UW position was kind of interesting. They're saying, well, yes, we would like to not do this. We would like to move away from this. We would like to have a time when we don't actually use the fetal body parts. Well, why? What? Because it's ethically fraught to be able to do it. In this particular case, as I understand it, the research would continue with all of the lines, all of the tissues obtained before 2010.
Right.
So therefore, a lot of the the histrionics about this seem to be somewhat exaggerated. But again, I do think that this is one of those moments where I want to hear people articulate a defense of what Planned Parenthood has been doing. And generally, what I've been hearing is more of an attempt to just change the subject.
I agree, my position all along has been, if you're actually pro-abortion, pro-choice, you shouldn't really have a huge problem with what Planned Parenthood was engaged in.
Yeah, unfortunately, because, well, since you're killing them, what does it matter? So what is it you don't get this week? Let's go around the table. Dan Adams, you're first.
I don't get why National Democratic Chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz can't explain the difference between the Democratic Party and a Socialist Party. My God, is she really that afraid of Bernie Sanders that we have to pander to outright socialism?
There is a difference? Colin Roth.
Absolutely.
What I don't get is why, with the increase in news stories about a teacher shortage in Wisconsin, there's often no mention of teacher license reform. You can either dig in on what isn't working or break down barriers for smart, qualified people.
Linda Bruin.
Well, a 2012 Harvard study found that our air marshals are overworked and sleep deprived. They have memory loss, slow response times, and their suicide rates are climbing. But the TSA hasn't implemented the study's recommendations. What are they waiting for? An air marshal to commit suicide in flight or to sleep through a terrorist attack?
Brian Sigma.
What I don't get is why teachers' unions are opposed to pension reforms and collective bargaining reforms that would save teacher jobs. In Chicago, 1,500 school personnel are being laid off due to budget problems that could be avoided with simple financial reforms.
Well, what I don't get, Donald Trump, or why anyone would think his vulgarity, boorishness, his ego, his third-grade mentality, or his insults of Mexicans, POWs, fellow candidates, conservatives, women, make him a good candidate. Really? Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Dan Adams, you're first.
Well, my winners are the Milwaukee Bucks. The signed arena bill gives the team a deal that was more or less what they originally wanted. My losers are members of Congress. If we're ever going to stop public subsidies for stadiums and arenas, it has to be done nationally. I support the Bucks arena, but there should be federal laws to stop teams from threatening to leave a city if they don't get their way with public money. Congress, get to work.
Colin Roth.
My winners this week are the Kohler, the Kohler family, and Whistling Straits. The PGA Championship is a big deal, and the story of the Kohler family and company is one that ought to inspire. My loser this week is Russ Feingold. He's come out in support of the increasingly unpopular Iran nuclear deal and continues to show his hypocrisy on his longtime campaign finance pledges.
Linda Bruin.
Well, if you're raped, there's a 98% chance police will never identify your rapist. If you're murdered, there's a 67% chance they'll never identify your killer. This is partly due to DNA kits not being being processed and due to laws that prevent police from even collecting DNA samples. My winners are the federal government for sending $700 million to help local labs process the kits, and states who are passing laws that allow DNA samples to be taken from felons and those arrested for violent crimes. Wisconsin's new law started in April. My losers are the rapists Wisconsin's new law has already put behind bars.
Ryan Sigma.
My loser of the week is ISIS, and loser sounds too nice of a word because according to a graphic, in-depth New York Times report that came out this week, ISIS is holding over 3,100 women in sex slavery. It's time for this evil group to be completely blotted out. My winner of the week is Ukraine. The country has taken a beating from Russian-backed separatists, but so far it has managed to hold on to strategic shipyards that Russia needs if it's going to build a new aircraft carrier. As long as those yards remain in Ukrainian hands, the carrier is merely a propaganda poster from Moscow.
Well, my winner, Colin Roth, is right, Kohler in the PGA. Loser, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Her wall of lies and secrecy is crumbling. Her spin is laughable. She no longer seems inevitable, and her fellow Democrats are in full panic mode. Good times. Thanks for joining us today for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.